This is episode 65, why you should invest in property. Hello and welcome. We've been talking a lot about when is the right time, when is the wrong time to invest in property, but why should you invest in property? Why am I so interested in sharing with you property investment and the benefits of it? And I suppose the key question here is, what's more important to you, time or money? And it's a bit of a trick question, really, because actually money should be important to you. And if you remember the first 50 episodes of this podcast, I will have been banging on about how important understanding money, the role it plays in your life is. But I also will have been talking to you about time and how important time is. And there was one podcast where I said, I can lend you £1, but I can't lend you a minute. So let's take that question and look at it in a slightly different way. What's more important to you right now? How you spend your time on a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5? Or what is more important to you? Is it your Saturday, your Sunday, and your evenings? Now, maybe you're finding it very difficult to choose. And I don't want you to choose in a hard black and white, but if you can articulate why Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 is important to you, and why Saturday, Sunday, and your evenings are important to you, you can start to draw out your values. And I'm not going to go back into a whole mindset thing. This is very much about strategy here. But getting clear on what's important to you is actually a priority before you start investing in anything. So if you're going to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and you're doing it because you have to provide the money for your family, so you have to go to work, then maybe looking at your finances and recognizing how you could save money, how you could accumulate money, where you can identify money that you could invest in property to create a second income that would take the pressure off of your Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, would really help you. And I think that's one of the things that I have found so moving from the clients that I have worked with is so many of them, and I've said this many times before, particularly the men, are missing out on family life because they feel the pressure to provide. And if you could create a second income, a regular income that took that pressure off, it's got to be better for your physical health, importantly, your mental health, but also your family's emotional well-being. If we flip it the other way around, and actually what's important to you, more important to you than working, is actually how you spend your Saturday and Sunday, because that's where you get your fun, that's where you get your pleasure. Maybe you would want to look at, well, instead of just being restricted to having fun, pleasure, time with family, time with my hobby, whatever it is on a Saturday and Sunday, how could I increase that to a 3-day weekend or even a 4-day weekend? Then maybe you would get the clarity and, if you like, the focus to look at your finances in a way that said, well, okay, so where can I save money? Where can I accumulate money? Where can I identify money that I can release so that I can invest in property, so that I could buy myself out of work for a day, or even eventually 2 days a week, if I could run my business just 3 days a week? And really what I want to explain is that this is where I came to. I think it was actually less about whether Monday to Friday was important to me or Saturday, Sunday was important to me. But what was important to me was holidays and the opportunity to travel. And I think there's probably, if we did some psychoanalysis, there's probably some link back to my childhood and connection with my father, because we always went away, and he shut his business for 2 weeks in July and we would go to Italy, and it was this great road trip, and it brings up all these memories and emotions. And I have always loved to travel, slightly less than sitting in the back of a Fiat 500. And, now we've got the luxury of planes being so much cheaper. but the places in the world that I have visited, not just as a mermaid scuba diving, but also the land-based and the people that I've met from different countries, and the appreciation that it gives you of how blessed we are here in Europe and particularly in the UK. So I want to, and I've always wanted to travel. And therefore I knew almost from the minute that realization came to me, which was at the point at which I got divorced in my case, because I changed jobs and everything in my life changed, was that if I could create a life for myself where I could have lots of holidays or lots of free time in which I could choose to have holidays, and of course I would need the money to fund them, then that sort of balance would make me very happy. And in the early stages, what I did was I worked as a university lecturer. So it's not really a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 style job. In fact, in the early days, I was working Tuesday evenings and Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings, as well as all week, and then still having to prep lessons and mark and all of the other things that you need to do. But what I got was great holidays. So as a part-time or visiting lecturer, which was the term for me, we would finish teaching around the end of May, do marking and exam boards, but basically I would get that cracked out at the beginning of June. And then I've got 2 to 4 more weeks until the children broke up from school, in which I would do all my prep for the following year. So following September onwards, I would get all of those lessons prepped in advance. And then when the children broke up in the middle of July, we literally had 6, slightly 7 weeks holiday or time off. And in the early days, when I didn't have a lot of money, we would spend it in the UK. And when I did have more money, we would go abroad. So our first major holiday was 6 weeks to South Africa with the children when they were, I think, maybe 7 and 9. And that was great because I had a job with that flexibility, and I had a big Christmas holiday and a big time off of Easter, and then we had the reading weeks, etc., etc. So loads of time off work. What I also had, because I was a visiting lecturer, was I only got paid when I was working, and I didn't get paid when I was all this time off. So that's how I learned my management skills. I learned that what's important to me is having the freedom to have lots of time off so that I can do things with the time off that I have. But I also need to manage my money so that I have the money to have the fun that I want to have during my time off. And then this eventual lecturing role changed into a full-time permanent job of Monday to Friday. The holidays were slightly more constrained. I went back into, like most people, 4 weeks off a year and your bank holidays, which is very typical in the UK. And it put a bit of a constraint on the number of holidays I could have. But luckily, as that more regular income came into play, I think it may have been a coincidence that that very first meeting about property and putting property on my radar way back in, probably it was in 2003, but early 2004 happened. And I've told you this story before. My sister had a pension. She went to a pension seminar, invited me to come along with her. We heard someone talk about putting property into a pension. And this was, like I say, way back 2003-04. Spoke to one of the men there that was talking about properties. And I don't know, something clicked for me as being, wow, if we could own a house and rent it out and make money from it, we'd have more money. And then maybe we could do it again, and maybe we could do it again. And how can we make this work? And what's the maths? And the maths interested me as a way to, and I don't think I even knew the word, leverage our savings. And from that first opportune meeting, we bought our first 2 flats, and we went to our father and we said, look, we want to invest in property. Do you have any money that you could lend us? And he lent us, I think it might have been 40-odd thousand pounds back then. And we had a little bit of savings ourselves, and we put that money together, and that enabled us to buy those first 2 flats. And then nothing happened from 2004 right the way through to 2007. I was then working. I had that job. I was accruing money. I was probably spending a lot of it on holidays rather than building up a savings pot. But then what I worked out was something's going on in the market in 2007. I was aware of the fact that, and I think I'm loath to say this, but we do all look to the States. What's happening there tends to ripple. I think if we move now into the 2020s, we also need to look at, as we well know, what happens in Russia, what happens in China, and it won't be long before we're looking at what's happening in India and what's happening in South America. But at that moment in time, we were looking at what was happening in the States. And if you can remember back that far, there was, is it Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, or Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, but very odd named banks. And they were in financial difficulty. We had a little blip of that here in early 2023, where a couple of banks around about Easter time had a wobble. And I was looking to see, is this the start of some other crisis? But I think because the 2007-8 start of the global recession is so vivid in the minds, not only of some people who were affected by it, but of government, that they stepped in very quickly to avert something like that happening again. Because with the situation that we're facing at this time, with the war that's going on in the Ukraine, but also we still haven't really dealt with the ramifications in all their forms from the pandemic, we could not afford to have an unstable financial market. So I started to pay attention, and I started to see that house prices had risen. And I've spoken to you over the last couple of weeks about house prices, and I was now really becoming aware of house prices had risen. The values of these two flats had increased. And could we, and I'm dead against this, right? And I've said to you, it's not about taking out the capital, but what if we remortgaged these properties quite conservatively, and we were able to release some money and use that to buy another property? What would that do? And what it would do is it would dramatically affect our cash flow. And I quite liked the cash flow. So instead of remortgaging those properties, I knew I wanted to invest. And I thought, well, before I make that very dramatic and actually consequential decision, what else could I do? And so we went back to our father again, and we said, look, we've got this business plan. And do you think that if I took this business plan to a bank, that they would help me? Because back then there were some rumors that there were landlords out there that, or rather investors out there, that had sufficient money that they could go to a bank and say, look, I've got 500,000. Will you match it with another 500,000 of investment, and then I can go and buy houses? Or I've got 100,000. Would you give me 500,000 as an investment drawdown facility? And I really liked the idea of having a drawdown facility, so I could go shopping for houses and then just draw down on a sort of a pre-agreed loan. I never got that far. I never did find out whether I would have got that or not, because in conversation with my father, he said, let me lend you the money. And so what we did, and I'm fairly sure I might have told you about this, and if not, it's in one of my books. I can't remember which one. Maybe it's in Using Other People's Money, the very first book that I wrote, the one with my face currently on it at the moment, which you can get on Amazon. But what we did was release the money from my dad's house in the form of a remortgage. So my mum and dad's house at the time was mortgage free. I would say it was probably worth about 400,000, and I think we released 200,000. I knew that I could invest that money into property, and that the profit would not only, or the rent would not only pay the mortgage, but then the profit would pay the mortgage on my parents' house and still leave us with additional profit. So these houses could pay their own mortgages, fund the cost of the borrowing to invest in the first place, and still kick out some cash flow on the other side. So it was just a mathematical no-brainer. I think probably the biggest challenge was that we then started doing this in 2008, 9, 10, which is just as the global market starts to crash. And I've talked to you about supply and demand, and trying to buy property when sellers, vendors are stressed or lenders are stressed does make things a bit more difficult. And it's much nicer when the market's calm and when the lenders feel flush with money and are easy to hand it out. But we got very creative. I did quite a few things, like bought a couple of properties that didn't have kitchens because where they had been repossessed, the original homeowners had removed the kitchen, or maybe hadn't paid back the cost of installing the kitchen. And so the kitchen company had come along and repossessed the kitchen independently of the house. And so here was a house without a kitchen, and a house without a kitchen or without a bathroom or cooking facilities or bathroom facilities is not mortgageable under lender terms. So I then needed to buy it outright for cash. So what I did was I worked out how I could get one mortgage, do an extended period where I could put in the bathroom or the kitchen, and then remortgage in a sense before I got to the end of it, and then basically have the house revalued because now there's a kitchen in place, and then I could go straight onto the mortgage, and all sorts of things, which I think back now were creative, daring, but got us properties that maybe a homeowner couldn't have afforded to buy because they couldn't have afforded to buy it and then put in the kitchen, and other investors possibly hadn't thought of those strategies. What's this got to do with why should you invest? Well, clearly I've got a bug. I've got a maths bug, I've got a property bug, but I've got a holiday bug. And what property has done for me is bought out my time from work or employment to the point where I can then choose how I spend my time. And to this day, we're talking 20 odd years later, I still, now what I'll do is I'll look at the forecast, and if there's some good weather coming up, I will shuffle my work around. I tend to speak to clients and make client phone calls. If I can, I keep them in 1 day a week, so that if we have a whole sunny week, I only have to spend 1 day in the office. And then any of the other work I want to do, whether it's marketing or things like this, recording the podcasts, or anything that I might have to do in the terms of work, whether it's going and viewing properties or running numbers, I can do that when I like. I could come in and I could get up early because the weather's going to be nice, and I could work from, say, 7 till 10, and then go out in the garden or go out for a walk or go out with Bob or whatever I want to do. If the weather's going to be nice and we decide we want to have a long weekend away somewhere, I can shuffle my time around because I have the money coming in from the property portfolio. So I don't have to work 5 days a week in my business. And that's why I pick and choose who I work with. That's why you won't see me really pushing hard on social media or anything like that, going, come and be my client. I've tried it in the past and I don't get pleasure out of it. I don't run big events. I'm not, my ego isn't massaged by having 60 or 80 people in the room and then getting everybody onto a course for £1,000 and whatever else. That's just not how I work. I choose to work with people that recognize that there's an opportunity here to prioritize their time over working to make money. And they will come from all walks of life. They'll be all different ages. So some are young, some are looking for school fees, some are older looking for retirement, some run businesses and want to step out of their businesses so they free up more time. Some, as I've mentioned before, are fathers that are missing their families. They want to be able to change jobs from a pressurized job in the city to something local. There's all sorts of reasons why people come to this recognition that their time is worth more than money. Yes, money is important, but their time is more valuable to them at this moment. And so finding an investment strategy that enables them to take money that would be earning just a passive low level of interest in a building society, or I listen to people and they overpay their pensions or they pay down mortgages when actually mortgage money is very cheap and they could be using that money to invest and buy more properties. They just start to think differently. So why should you invest in property? You should invest in property if you are starting to feel like you work too much, you work too hard, you work too long hours, you're stressed. But on the other side, if you recognize that you want more time with your family, that you've developed a holiday, that you've developed the travel bug like I developed, that you want more holidays, that you want more time off, that you just maybe want a day a week that you could pick in the middle of Monday to Friday where your kids are at school, your partner's at work, and you could just sit at home and do yoga all day if you want to. Or like me, plant your tomato seeds, whatever it is. If time is starting to become important to you, let's have a conversation about what resources you have and how you could maybe use them better so that you could buy yourself out of work or buy yourself into holidays and free time. That's why you should invest in property. That's the bit that's exciting. That's the bit that gives me joy. It's not, yes, I love the maths of working out a good deal. But knowing, like one of my clients who worked in the city, he felt a very pressurized job. He didn't get to see his children much. And over the years, he was able to change from a high pressure job to another job, which took some of the pressure off for him. He invested in properties. And then with the combination of investing in properties, his wife was able to go to university and study something that she wanted to do because she didn't have to work, because between the properties and his less stressful job, they covered all of their expenses. And now they're in a position where he's gone on to take on a whole new business of his own and given up work completely. And we're due to catch up shortly. And he's very excited. It's 1 year on and he's out of that rat race. And he's still a young man. And it's all because of the role that property played for him. And I'm going to see if I can find some conversations with people over the next series of podcasts about what property has done for them so that you can start to pick up on this. But I am still going to keep banging on about the investment techniques that are around there and make sure that you're still getting that content in as well. Thank you very much for listening. As always, my name's Vicky Washay, and I hope that I've been able to put some whoosh into the idea that time is more important than money. And if you can work out what your values are, then that may be the thing that spurs you into recognizing that investing in property is right for you. And if Monday to Friday is actually more important to you than your weekends, for whatever reason, you're building your career, there's no reason why, if you're out there working hard, earning money, that you can't be investing on the side as well and preparing for a future life when you want to maybe have options not to work as hard as you are now. So let's have a chat. Get in touch. Drop me an email. You know all the contact details. I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you and help you get that clarity so that you can rule in or rule out investment as being right for you right now. Thank you very much and very best wishes.